Hello, Jaswini. As you requested, here's a PowerPoint/video on Assassin's Creed lore. I hope you enjoy. Before we begin, just some quick housekeeping/information. Firstly, I won't be going into super deep into what happens in each individual game's stories. One, because of spoilers in case you ever want to play them, and two, because then this video will probably be like several hours long and overly specific. Plus, if you do ever decide to play an AC game, a lot of the specific details from individual games won't come up though. Instead, for this video, I'm going to go for more of like a broad overview/context of timeline that'll generally apply to like every game in some form, so the context is a lot more universal. Another important thing to know about AC lore is that this is a world where every conspiracy theory, mythology, religion, belief, no matter how wacky or minor, is not only true, but also connected. And we will see that today. With that said, let's get started from the very beginning. The earliest events in AC lore starts in around 80,000 BCE. During this time, the Earth was ruled by a race of superhumans called the Isu. Other names people use for them in this series are the ones who came before, the precursors, and Homo divinus, just to name a few. These guys were wild. They had like superpowers and tech that was basically magic. This tech let them do everything from like mind control, teleportation, invisibility, immortality, force fields, time travel, you name it, they could do it. This tech was generally referred to as Pieces of Eden, or Isu artifacts. The Isu created humans as slaves and workers by genetically modifying a, quote, pre-existing primate species. To zoom through their evolution, different human species were created for different quote-unquote roles. For example, Homo neanderthalis was made as their military personnel. Homo sapiens was made as their general laborers. A bit of a side tangent, but this is AC's explanation to describe the supposed quote-unquote missing link for human evolution, since the Isu skipped a lot of intermediate steps to go from primate to human. I do wonder where Homo floresi kind of fits into all this. But back on topic, the humans were physically and like power-wise weaker than the Isu. They lacked their superpowers, and the Isu specifically made these guys to be vulnerable to their mind control tricks. Humans, however, weren't really happy with this setup and with their Isu overlords, and decided to rise up against them. This rebellion was led by the actual Adam and Eve, as they stole an Isu artifact called the Apple of Eden. Although the Isu were technologically and physically superior to the humans, the Isu did end up producing a lot of human slaves for their labor, so the humans outnumbered them like crazy. Another issue that the Isu faced was that they foresaw an oncoming solar flare that would figuratively and literally cook the planet. So while they were dealing with the human uprising, they were also trying to figure out ways of preventing the upcoming solar flare. The Isu tried out all kinds of wild and wacky ideas, from time travel, space travel, Doctor Who-style reincarnation, space force fields, and more. None of them worked. The Isu lacked the time and resources to make it happen. So, the solar flare happens, wipes out the planet. The Isu described this event as, quote, the earth shook for days, the fires burned for weeks, and when the dust had settled, less than 10,000 of your kind still remained, and far fewer of ours. But we carried on, together, to rebuild, to renew. End quote. The Isu eventually realized there was no way to prevent the solar flare. Their plan in the limited time they had left was to make sure the next solar flare, which would happen in around 77,000 years in the future, could actually be prevented this time. They used really complicated math and technology to predict exactly what would happen in the future and leave behind specific messages, automated drones, and other stuff and technology to accomplish that, such as, for example, completing secret vaults and tech that could make a force field to block said next solar flare, and also guide people in the future with pre-recorded messages, DNA stuff to make it happen. Basically, imagine like the most complex 5D game of chess where they were looking millions of moves ahead. That's what the Isu were up to. After the solar flare, there were barely any humans left, and almost zero Isu. Despite this, the humans were able to repopulate, but the Isu couldn't. The Isu tried, even interbreeding with certain humans, which didn't help the Isu out too much. The Isu went extinct. However, this meant there were now some humans alive that had a very small amount of Isu DNA in them. These humans tended to have slightly above average strength, speed, reflexes, healing, and sometimes even a superpower to let some people see through walls and look at people and tell them if they're friend or foe or not. The games refer to this superpower as the sixth sense, or ego vision. These people are typically the characters you play as in the Assassin's Creed games. This is the in-game explanation for how your character is really good at stuff and has like cheat vision and stuff. Following the solar flare and the subsequent extinction of the Isu, humanity developed mythologies and religions regarding the Isu. Adam and Eve rebellion formed the basis of the Abrahamic religions. Norse mythology was inspired by the human-Isu conflict. The solar flare was what their version of Ragnarok was. Greek and Roman mythology was based on the actions of the 12 scientists that were working on ways to mitigate the solar flare. Minerva, Jupiter, that kind of people. Basically, like I said, Assassin's Creed says that every religion, mythology is true if in a twisted version of what actually happened regarding the Isu. In addition, a lot of religious events that happened after that, such as Moses parting the Red Sea or Jesus bringing people back from the dead, actually happened because they used Isu artifacts. In the millennium times since that, 2 secret factions emerged that learned the truth or were partially aware of the Isu and their artifacts. The first of this group was the Order of Ancients, the Ancients referring to the Isu. They later became known as the Templars, and later as Abstergo. These guys believed that fundamentally, humanity wasn't capable of living on their own, and they needed wise leaders from the shadows secretly guiding and manipulating them. Their plan was to use the Isu artifacts to help with that. They were officially founded around 1400 BCE. However, Templars consider Cain, the Cain that was Adam's son, as their founder and first member, since he was the first human/Isu hybrid that believed that humanity should serve under the Isu. He was the progenitor of the Templar ideology. These guys are the main enemy faction of the game, the guys you fight against. Since the series is called Assassin's Creed, the Templars are opposed by a group called the Assassins. The Templars are opposed by this other secret faction, the Assassins, also known as the Hidden Ones. The Assassins believe that humanity's free will and freedom is a right so sacred it's worth killing people over, hence the name Assassins. The Assassins were, quote-unquote, officially founded around 47 BCE. I say officially in quotes because the Assassins themselves believed there were proto-assassins, or people that would be considered quote-unquote real assassins before that. Similar to how the Templars consider Cain as the first quote-unquote proto-Templar, the Assassins retroactively consider Adam and Eve as the first quote-unquote proto-assassins. There are also lots of characters between Adam and Eve and the 47 BCE founding that fall under this camp. These characters typically believe many of the same ideologies that the official assassins would later officially adopt, and fought against the Templar/Order of Ancients, and were even somewhat aware of their true motives. These characters are typically the protagonists of the prequel games that took place before 47 BCE. The titular Assassin's Creed the games are named after refer to the core tenets and beliefs of the Assassins. Remember, the Assassin's core belief is that humanity's free will is sacred and should be protected at all costs, that kind of stuff. However, when the Assassins officially formed, they wanted a more formal summation of their beliefs that would serve as a guiding version of their philosophy going forward. So even millennia later, the latest generations of Assassins would be on the same page as the first Assassins. That, hey, we don't just blindly kill people. There's some nuance in philosophy here, guys. The actual creed is the following. Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. That sounds rather morbid if you take it literally, but to paraphrase the games, quote, it would be rather morbid if it were doctrine, but it's merely an observation of reality, that laws arise not from divinity, but reason. I understand now that our creed does not command us to be free, it commands us to be wise. To say nothing is true is to realize the foundation of society are fragile, and that we must be the shepherds of our own civilization. To say everything is permitted is to understand that we are the architects of our actions, and that we must live with their consequences, whether glorious or tragic. To summarize that, hey, there are no pre-made and divine laws. We gotta figure out our own destiny and laws, using our own reason and judgment, and we gotta live with the consequences of the choices we make rather than just be slaves. In addition, in order to give the Assassins these more formal set of rules and guidelines to help encapsulate their beliefs as well as give them some practical actions, the official Assassin's Creed consists of 3 main tenets. First, never hurt an innocent person. The Assassins believed that it was sometimes necessary to do political assassinations on corrupt people in order to bring security and freedom to the common man, but killing someone still takes their freedom and future away. The assassin believed the deaths of a few select people were necessary to safeguard the future of others, and that assassins should only kill their targets and not anyone else or the common man. That's why the games typically fail you for killing too many innocent civilians. The second tenet, hide in plain sight. This one is twofold. First is the literal aspect, that, yeah, we are a super secret society that people don't know about, and we're fighting another super secret society that wants to take over the world. We should probably use stealth and keep a low profile, guys. But there's also the philosophical aspect here. The assassins want humanity to be free to make their own choices. So the assassin shouldn't be publicly directing what people think. People should be making their choices without factoring in the fact that assassins exist. The third and final tenet, never compromise the Brotherhood. This one's a bit more straightforward. Basically, hey, don't get exposed or bring heat on yourself or the assassins. You gotta remain a super secret society after all. So for practically all of human existence, the Assassins and Templars existed in some form and have been fighting each other, whether officially or unofficially. In Assassin's Creed lore, nearly every event, no matter how minor, is in some way connected to the Assassins, Templars, Isu, or all of the above. Just to give a few examples, John F. Kennedy was assassinated by a Templar sleeper agent, Harvey Lee Oswald, so that the Templar Lyndon B. Johnson could accelerate the Apollo space program in order to find Isu artifacts on the moon. Alan Turing was sympathetic to the assassins and murdered by the Templars to prevent him from advancing advanced computation theory. Cable TV was made as a method of transmitting brainwave-altering signals and monitoring citizens. World War II was orchestrated by the Templars to create a new world order and allow them to pool their resources together to control the world through capitalism and scientific progress. And this ended up working. Even Bigfoot is real and is an Isu creation. Lots of historical individuals are assassins or Templars. On the Templar side, you have people like Thomas Edison, no surprise, Henry Ford, also no surprise, J.P. Morgan, Robert Oppenheimer, Tsar Nicholas II, Grigory Rasputin, George Washington, Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, as well as FDR and Winston Churchill, Harvey Lee Oswald, Rodrigo Borgia, etc. On the assassin side, you got people like Dante, Niccolo Machiavelli, possibly Mahatma Gandhi and Joan of Arc, and Nikola Tesla. Generally speaking, throughout history, the assassins were usually the underdogs. People sometimes preferred stability to freedom, which the Templars exploited, allowing them to accrue more resources, and after World War II, this helped the Templars gain a massive upper hand, and they established a company called Abstergo. So Abstergo are now the modern Templars. Imagine if Walmart, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Google, as well as every government ever, was run by a secret shadow company ruling over them. That's Abstergo for you. That could never happen IRL. In the late 20th century, they created a machine called the Animus that lets you relive your ancestors' memories. The Animus runs on the following premise: that all your memories are recorded in your DNA as is, and are passed on to your kids. So let's say you have a kid at age 30 and a second kid at age 40. Your kid at age 30 has, in their DNA, all the memories you had until you were 30 years old. And your kid at 40 years old has 10 more years worth of your memories in their DNA. This is the series explanation for stuff like human and animal instincts, dreams, and even the concept of deja vu. Side note, but this isn't how memories work in real life. IRL memories aren't stored as computer files in your DNA. Instead, they are stored as patterns of electrical signals in your brain. They aren't physical things that exist, but this is the ECU universe, so let's roll with that. If you ever want, and if I have time, I might actually give you a lecture on how memories work. But back on track, the Animus is able to read the memories stored in your DNA and display them as part of a simulation. There is a catch, however. Sometimes it's not really possible to fast forward or skip memories. A lot of memories in the Animus need to be explored linearly. To go back to that example from earlier where you had a kid when you were 40, and that kid wanted to see your memories, they might not be able to jump straight to when you were instantly 30 years old using the Animus. They might have to watch through a good chunk of your memories from when you were 20 and then you were 30 first. Now this is when we finally get to the actual Assassin's Creed games. Because typically in AC games, you don't play as the historical assassin directly. You play as someone in the modern day, playing as the historical assassin through the Animus as they attempt to uncover their memories. Side note, but in some games you can actually play as someone playing as someone. So there's you play as a guy in the modern day, who's playing as an assassin, who's playing as another assassin, so it can get Inception layers deep. But back on track. The Assassin's Creed games use this to justify just about every aspect of their game as diegetic, because the Animus is literally designed in-universe to use video game controls to make it easier for users. So for example, your health bar isn't just a regular health bar, it's actually a synchronization bar that shows you how stable the current memory is between the modern-day Animus user and the historical assassin. When you run out of health, it's not a non-canon do-over like in every other game. Instead, it's the modern-day Animus user reloading the memory to the last stable point. Difficulty modes are actually canon Animus assists the Animus user is getting. The bugs and glitches are canon glitches in the Animus. Even the microtransactions and cosmetics are canon in later games as actual add-ons you can get for your Animus simulation, so it gets wild. This is simultaneously the dumbest and coolest thing I've ever heard. Like, unironically, you could argue that Assassin's Creed is technically the most immersive game ever. You know how people complain about open world games like, oh, the main story is telling me to do X thing, but I went off and did side quests for like 20 hours straight. Well, technically that is canon in Assassin's Creed because that's the Animus user doing it, while the historical assassin did it differently, so both possibilities are technically accounted for. In the early Assassin's Creed games, a downside of overusing the Animus is something called the bleeding effect, where the memories of your ancestor end up fusing with the user, resulting in them getting the skills of their ancestor, but also having a mental breakdown, seizures, coma, and or death. To use an example, if your ancestor was a mountain climber, and you overuse the Animus to see their memories, you might end up in a situation where his mountain climbing skills transferred over to you, and you have them, and you can mountain climb like a pro despite never actually mountain climbing before, but at the cost of not being able to tell who you even are anymore and dying in the process. So, pros and cons. There are examples in the lore of like a pregnant woman using the Animus and experiencing the memories of both her ancestors and her kids' paternal ancestors simultaneously, so that's wild. You are also locked into having to be a descendant of the person whose memories you were looking at. However, in 2014, Abstergo managed to patch those issues. Now, anyone can look through anyone else's memories, even through the cloud, provided they had a DNA sample on hand, either directly from the person or through their descendants. You still have to go through the memories in linear order, but at least you wouldn't die or get an unintended bleeding effect. Abstergo used this new technology to produce Assassin's Creed games in movies in-universe to make money and also search through them for ESO artifacts and to use the bleeding effect to train their agents. This was always kind of weird to me, like, why make games about the assassins? Don't you want to stay hidden, lol? So yeah, the Assassin's Creed games actually exist within the Assassin's Creed games. I'm not joking, that's actually true. And that concludes the brief overall look at the Assassin's Creed lore. I glossed over a lot of stuff from the individual games, sure, but I feel these are the main points that just about every AC game shares in some form and should maybe enrich your experience. I know it's confusing for like a new player to go in and be like, yo, what's an ECU, what's an artifact, and what's even going on, so this will probably give you some context. Before I head out, if you do want to start playing these games as a new fan and you're curious, here are my 4 recommendations for which games serve as the best entry points for a new player. The first option is the latest game in the series, 2023's Assassin's Creed Mirage. It has pretty decent stealth and combat mechanics. Its historical setting, map, story, gameplay are all really solid. I like them. It was also intended as something of a combination of like a soft reboot and a return to form for the series. Its main downside is that the modern day storyline / lore is, let's just say, confusing to say the least for new players. Although returning players like myself found it really cool. But still, I really recommend this one. It's a rad game. Another good option is 2009's Assassin's Creed 2, which, funnily enough, actually has a Mac port in one of the ways I first played it, Lamau. This one is widely regarded as like a fan favorite, if not the fan favorite. Personally, I'm a little bit more mixed on this, but as an introductory game, I can't say it's not a good option. So, both the modern day and historical storyline, they take their time before they start getting wacky, so it's easier for a new player to follow along. Which makes sense since it was the second mainline game in the series. I also love the parkour, setting, music, like those are good stuff. The combat and stealth mechanics are a bit questionable, but overall, if you're a new player, this is a good starting point. Next option is 2013's Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. This game is very popular, even among non-AC fans, because it was, and arguably still is, one of the better, if not the best, pirate games on the market. You play essentially a pirate assassin. You have a ship which you can sail on in the water in the Caribbean, and you have like land for assassin gameplay. It's actually pretty cool. The story is also easier to follow along, both in the historical section and in the modern day section, which again makes it way more accessible. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of this. I like my Assassin's Creed game to be like 90% city based, at least. I like more parkour kind of stuff. This game is at least 30% city based and like 70% water slash naval based. And I'm not the biggest fan of pirates and naval games, but I don't know, like there are people that swear by it as their favorite game. This is a fan favorite for a reason, and it's like I said, it's really popular among like new fans. So gotta put it here. The last recommendation, and one of my favorites though, is Assassin's Creed Unity from 2014. The map is amazing. It's still like one of the most detailed things I've ever seen in a game. Like Unity's Paris feels like Ubi went like with a time machine in the past. The crowds are detailed, amazing. The combat and stealth are on the simple side, but they are rad and fun to play around with. The customization is great. The parkour is visually amazing. Like, it's a good game. I really recommend it. Make sure you don't play the PS4 version on PS5 via digital only. Just a bit of advice. On release, Unity was raked through the coals because its launch was terrible and the story was lackluster. But over time, its reputation has changed to be more of a game we didn't appreciate enough kind of situation. And like I said, it's one I really, really recommend. And with that said, that concludes this presentation. Take care, Just Finity. Let me know if you like this kind of stuff and if you want like more of these. I'm thinking if I have to do more of this, I might do one on the Metal Gear Solid series and maybe one on the Batman Arkham series, since those are the ones I can just like do with like quicker or faster, since I'm very familiar with them. But yeah, that's future me's problem. So yeah, take care.